Welcome to Recogs, the inventory success podcast where we discuss how the top operators source, manufacture, finance, and distribute their products in order to sell their inventory and create successful businesses. I'm your host, Mike Gelb. I'm the community manager here at MFD. MFD is the inventory success platform for consumer and B2B companies. When we say inventory success, we mean that we help companies manufacture, finance, and distribute their inventory across multiple channels. If you're looking for help reducing your COGS, inventory financing, or selling to new channels, we're happy to see if we can help at manufacture.com. Now, I know this is a free podcast, but that doesn't mean I don't have a favor to ask you. If you're enjoying this show, please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or whichever you're listening to this podcast on. We not only produce podcasts, but we also throw awesome events, bringing together the consumer ecosystem around the country. For more information and to be notified when our next event is, please sign up at manufacture.com/events. Our guest today is Dan Stephenson, who's a co-founder and COO of Daily Crunch. Daily Crunch produces and sells upscale nuts. So almonds that are soaked in purified water to activate or sprout the nuts and then dehydrated. We talk about the origins of Daily Crunch, how they were able to find the right manufacturing partners, how they had to pivot during COVID on their sales channels, the number of SKUs they launched with, and their approach to expansion, both from the SKU perspective and also from an accounts perspective on the retail side. Without further ado, here's Dan. Dan, thank you so much for joining me here today. How are you doing?
Doing great. Great to be with you, Mike.
Oh, thanks so much. Really appreciate your willingness to come on the podcast. Let's start from the very beginning from Daily Crunch. What was the insight or aha moment that led you to co-founding the company?
Yeah. So I met Diane and Laurel in 2019, and I was doing some consulting for different brands in the space. And the differentiation, I tried what Diane had been doing for 20 years. She learned this process in India. Of soaking and sprouting nuts and seeds. They would do it there for brain health purposes. And I didn't know anything about sprouting, and I don't think the rest of the country does. But what I did notice was there's a texture crunch difference. And so taking this process and adding dehydration techniques to it really yielded something that I saw that could be a platform for snacking. And so at that point, she'd just been selling it gifting it to friends and family, and wanted to make a business of it. Laurel, I met here in Nashville. She came from Unilever, spent 13 years there on the big brand side, Hellmann's, Lipton, Dove campaign for Real Beauty, things like that, and understands how big products go to market. And I had built a line of mac and cheeses before in the CPG space, so that's how I got to really diving deep into CPG. And we've been building since 2019 together.
That's amazing. So once you tasted the product and saw the product and fell in love with the product, what was then like the next step from taking this ideas, saying it to friends and families, to actually building it into a proper business? How did you think about like the first, for example, sales channel that you wanted to go through?
I think when you draw up a better for you product, your typical route to market that you envision is going to be, we're going to go to Whole Foods, do a regional, build that out. We're going to go to Sprouts. We're going to grow out all those great natural retailers. And what happened was we launched on March 4th, 2020. And so take those plans and throw them out the window, because that's not happening anymore. So we had to get real creative, and it was definitely. I think we've learned more for it than having not gone through it. That being said, those retailers weren't on the table at the time, and so we had to learn how to connect with our customer and make a splash, even when grocery stores weren't functioning to their normal capacity.
What at that time in March 2020, grocery stores weren't closed, right? They're obviously necessities. They were still open. Was also retailers just not taking or being a lot less receptive to new brands?
There were no meetings going on in 2020. If you weren't milk, bread, toilet paper, you a consumer staple that they couldn't keep on the shelf, then it didn't matter. And so we knew that with this product, a lot of it was going to take consumer trial and discovery, especially with a young brand. And so when people aren't going in the stores and they're ordering everything via pickup, it's really tough to create that trial.
Right. So how did you pivot? I imagine it's going to D2C or hitting e-commerce. Where did you go?
Yeah, so we leaned into D2C and our e-commerce strategy. We weren't planning on going on Amazon as quickly as that we ended up doing. We ended up jumping on that summer. And we also partnered with a few different boxes that would get it to different consumers that were in our demographic. And so we would use those boxes as like a sampling opportunity with some awareness on a smaller size, to then try and get them to go and find us on our website. But that was also around the time when iOS 14 switched. So, that transactional gaining customers through Meta, and the tracking of that, it was kind of all shut down. And so we never really leaned into paid ads, which again I think is a benefit. So it's been a more organic strategy on that side all along.
And so wow, I mean, got hit doubly first, obviously on the retail side, which was your first route to market, and then had to pivot to D2C, and then you weren't able to obviously get as much data as you'd like to on when it comes to email marketing with and be able to actually track or present an ad to the right people because of course the iOS 14.5 update. So how did you approach on the organic marketing side? Was it mostly partnering with the subscription boxes and then getting people to actually, that was your point of discovery with folks and your ability to sample, and then the hope was that they then go to your website to actually make the purchase? Was it kind of doubling down on that, or was there also other ways that you kind of approach organic?
I'd say a true organic would be top of funnel, let them go through, learn about your process, and move them through, and eventually they become a customer. And now that's generally how we look at our audience. We want to spend advertising dollars on where they are, but back then it was more like, could we get an insert in something that we know is our core customer? So if we gave a sample, or if they were to buy things at a discount, could we put a marketing piece that would then be a QR code that takes them back, and then we could link and know that it came from this box, and that became our way of tracking, where we had segmented groups, where they discovered us, which sample they tried, and then being able to follow up from there. But quickly, I mean, we knew that, having built in this space before, it's really tough to get the consistent scale you need with just D2C and e-commerce. So the goal was always becoming a wholesale brand and getting to retail. So we were working backwards with what that would look like, and started looking at some areas that maybe they weren't ready for us now, but they would still take a meeting because they were still operating. And so we got some early meetings with partners that are actually strong partners now, that allowed us to grow. One of those was the airlines. So airports were shut down, or were not shut down completely, but they weren't as busy as they used to be.
Yeah.
But they
people were very, very hesitant to travel. Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of the brands that were in there just weren't really counting on that being a channel before. And we started working through the airport channel, meeting with the buyers in this channel, of some of the airport operators, and created a strong plan coming out of the gates when travel did return. And we're up to over 100 airport stores around the country that move a lot of daily crunch, and it's a great touch point for awareness.
Yeah. I was talking to another founder who came on the podcast, and he said he absolutely loves that channel because also in terms of how much you can charge and the margin, it's so great because it's a lot more expensive in that channel. But it's also, as you say, like a great customer awareness or a way to actually get people to get your brand in front of people, especially something like Daily Crunch, which you can just take it kind of on the go, which is great.
Yeah, I mean it's for better for you snack, it's a qualifier of either people that are traveling for business and maybe don't want to eat junk on the road. And we are getting a lot of people that are converting from they don't want to grab a bag of Fritos or Doritos when they travel. They don't want to feel like crap after they finish it. And then you have the better for you buyer that's traveling personally, but usually with higher disposable income. And it's not a cheap product, so it helps segment targeting right from the beginning.
And when and how many SKUs when you were all launching and launching Daily Crunch, how many SKUs did it make sense to launch with?
We launched with three, and then by the end of the year, we had two more. So we ended up having our core five for a while there. I really like that. I wouldn't want to launch a brand with less than three. I like three as a brand block. Ideally four, but four is a lot out of the gate. Like no retailer is usually going to give you four SKUs. And some you're lucky to get two. That was the case for us with CVS. They were one of the early partners that believed in us, and they were looking to create a healthy set. Again, not on my strategic roadmap for places that were going to sell a lot of healthy snacks, but they created this great set at the front of the store. It's called the Fuel Up and Go set, and so before it was labeled the Health Hub, and now it's the Fuel Up and Go. And they are really leaning into that healthy snack segment, and had like-minded brands that we sell with all the time at the Erewhons and the Whole Foods of the world. And so they gave us two SKUs to start, and we outsold the set in the 300 stores they put us in. And after a year, they expanded us to about 2,700 doors, and this past year added a third SKU.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah, I remember I previously had on another founder. He started off with 5 SKUs, and he was like, it was such a mistake because I should have done 3 because all the retailers were like, oh, I want like these 3 or these 3, and it was all different. And so the supply chain, it was like a bit of a nightmare starting out because because there was too much choice in terms of what you can actually pick from a SKU count if you're a retailer. Walk me through to when did you first hit retail?
End of 2020, we started rolling out to retail. So we went into the New at KeHE program, and so that became available in 4 or 5 KeHE regions to retailers starting in early 2021.
What overall was like the early, I guess, retail strategy? Obviously, you started off on different regions, but was it to try to create density in specific regions with other retailers and then expand to new regions, and then kind of go on a per region basis? Or was it a bit more, once you're in a retailer, you actually try to see how if you can grow with that retailer nationally or multiple regions faster?
Yeah. We didn't have any national retailers at the beginning. One of the earliest believers in us was Meijer. They're a Midwest chain. They're fantastic. They're now one of our largest customers today. Even though they're just in the Midwest, they've been a fantastic partner and a real case study for us to show that we could succeed in more than just the natural channel, but in true conventional. So I'd say early on, it was to focus on a couple core regions. Ironically, the change of Whole Foods from a place where you could approach the regional buyers to get placement, that's kind of gone away. I mean, everything flows through Austin, and maybe you'll get some regions based on that. But because we had manufacturing in a different place than our home base using co-packers, we never qualified for local. So that kind of pushed out the window. So one of the directions we leaned in was where there's an awareness for sprouting already. And so Daily Crunch went to the West Coast. So we took Daily Crunch to some of those great West Coast retailers like Bristol Farms and Jimbo's and you know, now we're growing in there, but Erewhon, we're a top selling nut seed in Erewhon, and basically leaned into where there was already some education in place, um, and really built out those types of areas. Now, I will say one of the mistakes I did do was going to KeHE for a 5 region push out, and that's what they require for this new at KeHE program. And then you have to make sure you move that distribution in all these different places, because they require you to move to open 5 DCs, which is a lot for a small brand to then go and put 5 SKUs in what was 2 sizes.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. When that happened and you actually had to store your product in 5 DCs and go into 5 different regions, did you then have to take a step back when it comes to actually growing growing into other accounts in order to focus to make sure that those velocities, for example, are well performing? Or how did you even like measure success, I would say, when you actually would go into a region?
Early on, the number one goal is find key accounts within those DCs. And so I worked backwards from that key account list with brokers. And so we quickly layered in regional brokers into those areas that we were in. And then made sure that we were hitting the metrics within each of those key retailers. But it's once that product gets there and just starts sitting, that's a tough thing to turn on and go. And so we just really had to hustle to make sure we were getting great accounts in each of those areas to keep those items alive and moving.
And I would say when it comes to retail execution, what are some of the strategies that you all did in order to strengthen the velocities or continue the velocity success? I know that you mentioned earlier that when there is an educational part to the product, so doing a lot of, for example, sampling to drive that customer awareness, that was huge for you all. But what were maybe, first of all, I mean, how many samplings were you able to achieve coming out of COVID, and also what are maybe some of the other types of what is like investing in a channel from your standpoint in order for velocities to kind of to continue being successful?
Yeah, I mean, as you grow the store count and it's not in your backyard, you're going to have to lean on other people to be your eyes and ears and to help you accomplish some things. So my goal has always been to try and get secondary placement in each of our accounts, because that's going to be the best way to grab eyes in that store. And so really operating, and it depends on the retailer, but sometimes operating off a high-low price strategy so that we could promote deeper a few times a year, and then pulse some other things. That is one part of how we've looked at promoting and driving that trial, because we have a 40 plus repurchase percentage, and so we just know you got to try it, and we know that you're going to be a fan. And so we've since layered on like base makers and some merchandising. Those go great for making sure products out there, it's straight, asking for secondary placement, getting clip strips. We're evaluating bringing some of that in-house as creating our own team, but that would just augment what we're already doing with groups like them. So I'd say merchandising is super important in the snack space. That secondary placement is everything for snacks, getting the trial, getting the awareness. And so the easiest way to do it in store is usually with some sort of tag or display or something to catch an eye. As good as your packaging may be, you need to utilize those as best possible.
What's your point of view on discounting? Because on one hand, or just running promotions, because on one hand, especially when you're a new brand, it can drive velocity, it can drive interest. On the other hand, you don't know as well if it's actually validation to the price point they actually want to excel at.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we're always cognizant of, but the main way you want to look at it is the customer depending on it to be on sale to buy you? And so now I think our tracking of it has gotten a lot better, in the sense of if we run a promotion in an area, what was our baseline before that said promotion, especially on a deep one? And then what was that baseline after? Did it fall back down to where you were? Because that means it wasn't a very effective promotion. What we've seen is with the right promotion, as long as it's not every month, they can, people can consume you know, this bag in one sitting with a partner. Like, so we know that the velocity is there on them finishing it. And so, um, whereas like if it's spices, a different category, maybe you only buy those twice a year and you wait for the sale. But on something like snacks and consumables, you do have enough velocity there that we can put it on sale once, but they're going to want it next month and the month after, and we're not on sale in either of those months. Hopefully, you've created something that drives enough interest to buy it at retail, and we're seeing that happening.
I know that the plan was originally go to Whole Foods, the natural channels to sell, and yet it happened to be CVS, and also I know that now as well you're in Whole Foods, you're in Target, you're in both conventional and also natural. How was when you even from the very beginning, were you very cognizant when it comes to actually the actual pricing your product? Because there's certainly so many brands that go from natural channel and then try to make that leap in terms of going to conventional, and it becomes really challenging because the margin structure profile is not there. They're not able to kind of get the actual sales price to be to make sense for wholesale in a conventional grocery um make sense for them for the product. And so I guess what was your overall initial when you actually thought about pricing the product? Were you actually thinking about pricing it for what that actually looked like in conventional and also and also natural?
I'd say that having built here before and understanding markups between distributors and retailers helped a lot on that. We also went through the SKU accelerator in 2021 and made some fantastic mentors. And one of our mentors really really harped on our price pack, our architecture. Do we know where we want to be in each of those channels? And so as you go through each of the channels from mass to conventional to wholesale to natural, like does your price per ounce move with that across your different sizes into your different channels? And so part of that's looking when you're early on, you don't ultimately know where your cogs are going to end up. You want it to be in a reasonably good place to make it a viable product, but you don't know fully at scale what you're going to get to between co-packer tolling and ingredient sourcing, things like that. So we basically looked at the category and worked backwards on price, and knowing that you can always lower price, but you can't raise it. Oh, that used to be the ethos. We've seen a lot of people raise price in the recent years because of the environment we've been in. But we looked at what's in the natural channel. What are the markups in each of those from a distributor? Are we going to be marked up 20, 25%? Do we have to absorb a 40% markup at retail? 45? Sometimes you'll see a 50. What does that put us on the shelf, and what's our competition there? And so we did that for each of the channels. The next one to evaluate is the Costco channel, but we knew that if you figured out natural, conventional, and eventually where you're going to be priced at mass, we'd be in a reasonable place. So today you'll see our price vary between the different channels, and it's not necessarily that we're pricing it any differently. So, for example, we're $5.99 for our 5-ounce bag at Meijer, as well as Target. Great price point. We sell it for the same price then that goes to Whole Foods or Wegmans, and those will be $6.99 and $7.99, and just markups and margin requirements for the people in between just change everything. And then in the airport channel, you'll see $8.99, $9.99. I've seen an 11 that makes me cringe, but it's they do what they can get. So
Yeah, I guess also to your point that you're also not the one setting prices at the end of the day, right? It's a retailer in terms of what they actually think that actually makes sense for that channel. I'm sure as well they're looking over their shoulders to see what other accounts are pricing your products, but at the end of the day, like they're the ones that normally set the prices. Obviously, you give them guidance, but yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. They obviously know their customers very, very well.
yeah, and it's working together to being like, what's a price that we can actually move product, and is anybody willing to cut margin to drive a lot more volume if we think there's a key price point. So that's always been a discussion, and that's where I think true partnerships with retailers really makes the difference.
When you were starting out, what was your approach? I know that you've been in CPG for a long time, but what was your approach finding the co-manufacturers and the right manufacturing partner? And was Daily Crunch as a product, like what was the most complex part maybe to actually building Daily Crunch as a product?
Yeah, we found a co-man early on that had the dehydration capabilities that we needed. And, we knew that not everybody was going to be able to do it. It's a time-intensive process. So it's a 4-day soak, sprout, and dehydrate process to produce our line of products. And so not that it takes labor all of those hours, but it does take time in people's equipment. And so you had to find the right partner that believes in you. And so, um, with that first partner, they were at they had made people's products before. They had the capabilities. They hadn't done sprouted nuts per se, but they had the right type of setup for us, equipment setup for us to be able to be successful. And I think co-packing, co-mans, a lot of it's about stages. Like the person you start with probably isn't going to be the person you finish with if you're growing really fast as a brand. So we now have 2 co-packers, including our original. And there's just different capabilities when you grow and scale. I mean, we were able to, um, you know, 6x our capacity overnight with a new co-man. And so those are the types of things that you need to do if you're scaling really quickly. We do R&D ourselves, but having a partner that will also do R&D alongside you and let you come in and test it, that was also a big requirement. How open are they to letting you in your facility, testing things out, coming whenever you need it, doing box checks, in taking a look at what else is um, being produced. What are the other capabilities that we don't know you have in case we want to release other products?
How long overall when you're launching new products, when does it make sense to first of all launch new products that you feel like that the timing is right? Is there like a data point that you look for that you think, hey, okay, maybe let's go from 3 to 4 or 3 to 6, or and secondly, how long does that R&D process take?
I think there's always that friction between operations and marketing, because marketing will even sales, marketing and sales will tell you, uh, we need all these different SKUs to be able to bring new people into the brand and get them excited and have something to talk about. And so for some brands that doesn't work. I think we've gotten to the point, especially with two co-man strategy, that we can run, full production runs of a test SKU, and do it, fairly profitably. And so down to that one SKU. So maybe we only make a run of it and do an LTO. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other costs that go into it, but we can tag it along with a bag order, hopefully share some of the same ingredients so you're not just ordering just for that one. But, I think that's an important thing to look at. Is it going to be something that goes out to retail? uh, I always call it like shiny object syndrome or like product ADD. Don't get product ADD. Focus on the goal. And for, retail, it's a lot of blocking and tackling. And so it becomes harder to block and tackle when you've got, 10, 12 SKUs and you're only going to get 3, 4 on the shelf. But then they, like you mentioned before, they want different SKUs in each of those stores. And so then you don't have critical mass across any of them. And so I think knowing from the beginning or knowing quickly which ones are your winners and being able to cut it, if it's not, is important. And so, we did have one SKU that we cut. It was our coffee coconut. I loved it as a flavor profile, but it changed too many times. It started off as coffee soaked almonds, which were very polarizing. Some people loved it because it was soaked in this Arabica coffee, so you got these rich coffee notes. But it's super intense, so it had a little bit of a bitterness. And so then we transitioned that SKU into a trail mix. And then after we transitioned to trail mix, we changed the name. So just too many things happen. And so it caused confusion on the customer side. They were like, I used to buy the coffee ones. What's this coffee coconut? Or is it cinnamon java? Is this something else? And so I think that you really want to make sure through a lot of testing, I'd rather produce that LTO and have it run as an LTO several times before we take it to retail. And we know it's a home run with the name, the packaging, the design, the taste, the flavor, even how it fits into our operations. Before you go to retail, which then means, you're producing larger amounts of it and, making sure that you've got pallets on pallets of supply ready to ship out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's I appreciate you also spelling out in terms of R&D and the different kind of variations that you have to go through in order to get, the right product. How also do you think about as well, which is so hard to do in CPG, about the cash flow management side of things and about financing? I know you just raised another round of equity, which congratulations. That's incredible, especially in this market, which it's so freaking hard to do. So that's unbelievable that to do that. But how do you think about overall financing the business? When it makes sense, for example, to use equity in order to finance the business, or when it makes sense to use debt in order to finance the business?
Yeah, I think we had not used much debt up to this point. So when we first raised in 2021, I think that round took like a month and a half. Uh, it's changed. This last round took a lot longer than a month and a half. So that first time, we never raised debt alongside of it. We used basically the equity for everything. Now, this next time around with the current raise, we just closed an equity portion. Now we're going to go out and raise a line of credit. And so we're vetting those finance options. And I think the important thing to look at is not only the cost of capital, but the uses of it. And so for us, we're looking to use all working capital, so inventory, supplies like AR, be able to run that through a debt mechanism, even if we don't need it yet, just so it's clean, so that we're using equity for equity purposes. And so when I think of equity purposes, yes, I have trade spend built into our to each of our products sold, but beyond that, there's just a lot of costs. So you've got your SG&A, you've got your marketing, like you've got maybe some R&D on new SKUs, and just things that you need to do to operate the business, and even additional campaigns that you really need to do, and you've got some employees that you need to bring on that maybe you can't justify today, but they'll get you to a point further than you would have made otherwise. And so, our goal is to get to cash flow positive by the end of next year. That's a lofty goal for a young business, but we've got increasingly good margins, and we're trying to be as efficient as possible with that capital, but want to use debt for working capital purposes and then equity for equity purposes.
That makes sense. Have you ever had to pull out of a retailer because you just felt like maybe this is the wrong customer set for for Daily Crunch, or it just wasn't working?
Yeah, one of the ones that I can think of was, I'm not going to say the retailer, but the packaging requirements were so onerous. It was a bag inside a bag with a label and another label inside the bag and packed in a certain way. And all for a customer channel that really we did it a couple of times that we're like, I don't see this scaling enough. And so then it was something that we walked away from. Um, but for a normal distribution channel, we don't typically walk away. We have had to cut off sellers once we found out, when you're looking at your KHE and Unify sales reports, because those aren't stores, and you start looking it up and you're realizing I'm just selling to the person that's selling against me on Amazon. That is a frustrating one. So we definitely have to go after those. You can you can say all day that you don't allow third party resellers, but it's really tough if you don't catch where they're getting inventory from.
Totally, totally. Have you also had any issues with dead stock or inventory that you've been unable to sell? And if so, how are you able to kind of solve that?
Well, as it comes back to that operations versus marketing, like head-on conflict, we seem to love to make packaging changes. And so once you start having lots of versions of packaging out there, and then at some point, um, people want that best foot forward and don't want to keep selling that existing product with that packaging. Yeah, we've turned to some other places to do it. Like a Home Goods has been a partner for that sort of things, and so there's several other of those retailers that maybe it isn't your freshest packaging, but you still want to sell that product into the market.
How about form factor overall? Like, do you experiment, or have you experimented in terms of like the actual packaging, like not just like the packaging, what's actually on the what's actually on the product, on the packaging itself, but the actual like amount in terms of how much product is in each packet. Is that something you as well experiment per different retailer?
Yeah, I mean, we actually have three different sizes today. So we have our 4 ounce, 5 ounce, so that pantry bag, 4 or 5 servings. We have a 1.5 ounce, which is kind of like a mini meal on the go, between 180, 250 calories, like really hearty snack. And then we have a point 0.5 ounce. And so that point 0.5 ounce was a recent ad. It started out during that COVID era of you couldn't have anything you couldn't pour into cups for sampling. And so, all right, well, we give these as a sample, people can take it with them. And we realized it was a great way to sample. We've often send those to retailers as a way to give them away to customers to drive trial. So, for example, like there was a CEO of a food and beverage company that sent us an email saying, "Hey, you guys, Jimbo's had a sample of your turmeric and sea salt almonds, and I just want you to know, not only are they fantastic, and I just ordered a 6-pack off of Amazon, but it worked. Like your little sample." And I think that was the thing he was trying to convey, being in the space, is like, how do you drive trial and get awareness? And he was like, it worked. I went and turned and bought them because it's a fantastic product, and I wouldn't have even known to get it if there wasn't these little ones being given away. So that is a form factor that we're leaning into. And so I think every size has to have a purpose. That size is great for just a quick on-the-go snack. So it's like 80 calories, just a little taste, Offices is going to be, I think, a big channel for that, especially where the company is the one buying it for their employees. So those campuses. So I think there'll be a good use for that. So slightly bigger than the airplane size, or very similar to that airplane size that you get handed out.
My final question to you, Dan, is what do you value more? Do you value $100 of COGS, $100 of inventory of Daily Crunch, or $100 cash?
I mean, cash is king. I'm gonna take the cash all day. I I think that leveraging, cash begets cash as well. And so if I wanted to go to a lender and borrow against it, I can stretch that even further with a little bit of debt financing. So I might get 50 cents on the dollar for finished goods and 5% on raw materials. So give me the cash and let's go to town.
Okay, got it. Got it. Appreciate that. I appreciate that because we've had some folks answer on the COG side just because if they have let's say 50% margin, then that $100 of COGS turns into $200 cash. But at the same time, it also takes a long time because you also have to sell the product too. So these are all kind of trade-offs that we just love asking about. Dan, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This has been so much fun.
Mike, it was great. Loved being on here with you.
And there you have it. It was a pleasure having Dan on the podcast. Dan, thanks so much again for coming on the show. Like I said, we not only produce content, but we also throw awesome events. If you want to sign up for when our next event is, check us out at manufacture.com/events and sign up to be notified. Again, MFD, what we do is we're an operating and financing partner for consumer brands and also B2B companies. We help source, finance, manufacture, and distribute products across 20 categories. Thanks for listening.